All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It's called DM Radio. We're kicking off the year with predictions. What's going to happen in the year 2025? Well, goodness gracious, lots of things are going to happen. AI is going to be everywhere. We're going to get, I think, a lot of innovation infusing the worlds of probabilistic and deterministic, because that's the problem with these large language models. They are probabilistic, they do make mistakes. How do you correct those mistakes? What do you do? Yes, you can have your vector database, your RAG model. Lots of that stuff is going to be important. Semantic layers, I would argue, are probably going to be the most important way to train these things, and the use of maybe what are called adopter models. That's one way you could refer to the semantic layer. I've heard some interesting commentary about that lately. But the first guest we have is David Mariani of At Scale. He's been on the show before many times. They're doing a lot of really interesting work in this space and have been for years. And Dave, I'll throw it over to you. I think that we're going to see a lot of innovation in AI. We're going to see a lot of effort to ground AI, to figure out where you plug it into your operation and what you let it do. Obviously, agentic AI is another whole topic that we're going to dive into at some point during the course of the year in this show, I'm sure. And of course, the importance of data management and data warehousing and the traditional
Mhm.
deterministic side of the business, which is going to hold this stuff together and make sure you're getting accurate information from your models. But tell us, what are your big predictions? What's coming down the pike?
Well, look, I think that sort of the big data platform vendors, I'm talking about Snowflake and Databricks. I think there's going to be a real sort of mano a mano war going on in 2025. With Databricks just had their big funding announcement. They have plenty of fresh fuel to pour on the fire there when it comes to competing with Snowflake. And I think that both of them, and you can hear it from them even in their last major conferences, is that they're really sort of like moving on to trying to reinvent business intelligence. And they're trying to reinvent business intelligence with natural language query, which of course depends on Gen AI. So Gen AI has really changed the world, and I'm thinking that you're going to see in 2025, you're going to see real efforts to really move uh, business intelligence from a point and click app-based experience to more of a conversational experience,
Mm.
where you're asking questions in just your native language, as opposed to pointing and clicking and creating pivots and charts and the kind of
Mhm.
things we normally think about business intelligence today.
Yeah, that's a really good prediction, frankly. And I think that from all the conversations I've had so far about Gen AI use cases, almost every rational person says internal focus, meaning
Hmm.
decision support. That's what business intelligence has been for decades now. It's decision support. It doesn't always have to be right, but it has to be close, and you have to be able to go fishing to find out what's right. So I think
Hmm.
that's a very interesting point, because business intelligence is internally facing. Now you can face it externally to your partners, even to your customers, your prospects, even if you're really brave. But you do have to be careful because it gets things wrong. And I don't think there are any bulletproof ways yet to prevent it from doing things incorrectly. What do you think?
Yeah, well, look, we did a benchmark, and I've worked very closely with different tools that are trying to do that today. They're very early on, but I'll just give you an example of how wrong they could be. So TPCDS is a model that's a benchmark model. It's based on it's a retail model. It's fairly sophisticated. It's a multi-channel retailer, so they sell across catalogs, stores, and on the web. And they have inventory and promotions and the like. So if I just ask the question of the model today with anything out there that's already there, I just say, what was my total sales for 2002? It gets it wrong 100% of the time, Eric. That simple question. And why? Because total sales, you have to add up sales across all three channels:
Hmm.
web, store, and catalog, and it never gets it right. And so it doesn't get it right because it doesn't know what the term total sale means. Just imagine,
Right.
right, like how simple that is compared
Right.
to the kind of lingo and jargon that is so prevalent inside of companies and organizations, where obviously they have their own way of running their business using their own KPIs and their own business terms. There's no
Right.
way that Gen AI, without some kind of a semantics, can actually get the question and answer a question correctly.
Hmm. That's a really, really good point. And I think this gets to the value of a layer of abstraction, a semantic layer that captures the semantics of the business. This is how we define total sales. This is how we define customer. This is how we define region, all of
Mhm.
these things. And I don't think that you can, just for example, you can't rely on the LLM to do that stuff. We know that because it's too broad. And I keep wondering to myself, what was Sam Altman talking about when he said the era of large language models is over? Like a year ago, he said this. It's like, that's kind of odd. And I think it's because he knew that. I think he could figure out, okay, these things are really cool and what they can do, but it is not proven, it is not deterministic. And for businesses, they have to be deterministic, right? They have to know
Mhm.
what is the number. So we're going to have this sort of push and pull throughout 2025, trying to leverage the LLMs, but do so responsibly. And I think that you're really onto something with this layer in between, which is the semantic layer, the logic layer, because LLMs don't really do logic either, right? They're not math engines, they're not reasoning engines per se. Now they may be layering in these things, but at least as far as OpenAI is concerned, it's a black box. And so we can't really implicitly trust what they do inside that thing, right? So I think you're
Yeah.
onto something that the semantic layer, and that was it, it could be sort of an ontological thing.
Mhm.
It has to be specific to your business. Think like a data catalog. You would absorb from a data
Mhm.
catalog what our definitions are. That would be in this layer, right?
Yeah, you need that bridge between the LLM and your own company to become that bit to provide that business context, your business context to the LLM. Because what will the LLM do? So what I'm seeing, Eric, is that these people are working on using the LLM to sort of generate the query. So the LLMs will do the prompt and translate the prompt to English prompt into a query. The problem is that when you look at it, at LLM can write SQL, it can write SQL fine, right? Except writing SQL and joining the right tables and creating the right calculations that reflect your business, there's no way it could do that on its own because, like you said, it doesn't know about your business. So
Right.
how does it know what total sales means for Acme Corporation? There's no way it could know that unless Acme Corporation shared that with the general LLM, and that's never going to happen.
Right.
So you
That's
need
pretty
that. So
funny.
you need to have that bridge to say, hey, you know what? This is what it means. And then you could generate the sequel and have at least have a much better chance. If you know what total sales means, it means it's the sum of catalog sales for this column in that table, as well as the store sales table, as well as the web sales table. Then it could generate a SQL statement and add a where clause for 2002, for example, and you can have a chance of getting the right answer. But without that, it's like it's going to be wrong at least 80% of the time in our
Right.
benchmark. 80%
Well,
of the time, it's wrong.
yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that's so bad that it's undoable. I mean, it's just simply not going to pass muster and it's going to be ignored. And so there's going to be a lot of tension within organizations and boardrooms. And I think the other side of the equation is that executives are going to love the lure of a natural language
Oh
interface
yeah.
to
Oh
ask
yeah. Oh
whatever
yeah.
question they want. And so I'm reminded of the iPad when it came out and
Hmm.
BYOD. That's where BYOD came from, was because the
Hmm.
iPad was so interesting and so innovative that CEOs are like, I don't care if you don't support it. I'm bringing it to the office, so you better figure out a way to support it, right?
And Eric, like, look, you're absolutely right. I mean, uh, every single one of our customers is like off the charts excited about the possibilities, and it is up in the upper echelons. It's the CIOs that are interested the most. And you know what? There's a 2025. If we don't get this right, it's natural language query will be another failed experiment,
Oh,
and there'll be a lot of disappointment out there. So I really think it's going to be 2025 is going to be a critical year. Either we're going to start down the road of reinventing business intelligence, or natural language query will become another failed experiment.
wow. That's a pretty bold prediction right there. We don't want that to happen. I can promise you
Well,
that.
I don't want that to happen, so we're doing our best to make that not happen, and we're beginning trials now with a bunch of our customers, and we'll know very soon here whether the semantic layer and an LLM together can deliver enough accuracy so that enterprises can use natural language query and trust it.
Yeah,
And you know what? Because you think about business intelligence, Eric, you can't have a wrong number. It
right,
has to be 100% correct.
right.
So you can't afford to have a hallucination because just one wrong answer will be the end of it in terms of that will be the last time you ask a question
Right.
of
That's
that
funny.
system, right?
Yeah, right. Well, and it seems to me we're going to see serious disruption in the sort of pure play business intelligence market because of this. And there'll
Mhm.
probably be more consolidation. And you just think about if the natural language processing element works with a semantic layer, then a lot of these canned reports, I think, go out the window. I mean, there's a lot of time that is spent just generating reports that very few people read or even use. And I think a lot of that's going to go away and be replaced by ad hoc natural language queries. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I just just working with a customer this week, and they generate 30 PDFs that they send out via email every day for all the executives. And it's like, and the PDFs, boy, I mean, those dashboards are meaty. I
Hmm.
mean, they're like, wow, that was a lot of numbers. I just like I have I question myself and say, are those really getting looked at, right? Because ultimately you have a question and you want an answer. And today the process is like, especially for an executive, it's sending an email or Slack to somebody on the analytics team who's going to take about, probably a few days at best to come up with their answer. And if they could actually just ask that question via Slack directly of an NLQ bot, that would be obviously much more preferred than having to go and task a person to go manually go run some report to get their answer.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you're going to have to pick up the pace, do things faster, and weed out waste in your architecture in your system. I do think that we will see from responsible companies a greater effort placed on governing their data and on
Mhm.
vetting their data before they let it get into some RAG model. What do you think?
Oh, so Eric, I mean, governance is you can't do this without governance. I mean, so you have to have governance like inside of that layer, right? Inside that semantic layer or inside of the actual data platform, because you can't just open up everything to a natural language query because it's another place where the LLM can go completely off the rails
Right.
of basically giving you PII or giving you sort of information that you shouldn't be able to see. So you cannot make it work without governance. And that's the other part where I think a semantic layer or that adopter model, you've got to have governance in that layer because otherwise you can't open it up to the general, not the general public, but to the corporate worker because you can't trust that they're not going to ask a question and get information that they're not privy to.
Right. Are you seeing or do you predict small language models becoming more prevalent in the new year because of all these issues we're getting with large language models? Do any of your customers talk about that?
No, no,
Really?
because it's like it's like it's like I learned this lesson, Eric, when with Hadoop and in the Hadoop
Right.
phases. It's like at Yahoo, we invented Hadoop. I was there when we invented it, and Yahoo is a big tech company really, and we had lots of resources to make that thing work. And so, I based our whole initial go-to-market for at-scale based on doing BI on Hadoop. And a lot of companies tried to adopt Hadoop, and there was some initial success, but it ended up just collapsing because ultimately a retailer, a financial services company, they're not in the business to operate a data platform. They're not in the
Right.
business to operate or create an LLM. It's just not going to happen. So they're in the business to sell their products. And so they're gonna use cloud's resources to do that. And so I don't think you're gonna see small LLMs customized for the enterprise. I think you're gonna see that bridge that sort of like you're calling the adopter model, that
Hmm.
bridge that's going to connect the general purpose LLMs and make them useful for doing Gen AI for a business. And I think a semantic layer obviously is key to that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that because semantics are what define what's happening inside your organization. I think you're going to see some house cleaning on the data governance side. I think that we now have technologies to be able to scan whole environments and to identify where there's some problems. And I think you're going to see some clamping down on traditional data management loosey-goosey behavior. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I think like, the BI tools today all have their own embedded semantic layers, right? And what they've done with natural language queries, they've all added their own sort of modules for that. Now, that's problematic if you have more than one BI tool or
Right.
you have more than one way to ask a question, right? Because
Right.
now somebody who asks a natural language questions in Tableau is going to get a different answer from using Copilot in Power BI. That's not going to work,
Right.
and and so it's going to be very important that semantics for the business is treated as a separate as a first principle when it comes to data management, not something that is embedded in the last mile of analytics consumption like it is today.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be really important to extract those semantics, have them, live universally, and serve those questions, those analytical questions across a wide range of tools, including natural language.
Yeah, and we got less than a minute left here. So just to kind of carve it out, that semantic layer is going to be a very important layer in the information technology, in the information architecture, right?
Yeah, I'm predicting that you'll see the big data platform vendors start to create their own semantics within the data platform itself and really push those as a way of getting more control and actually creeping into the business intelligence space of the traditional BI vendors. I think you're
Right.
going to see data platforms try to get closer to the user into 2025.
Yeah, and I think that's going to lead to some consolidation, and I think it's going to lead to organizations winnowing down the number of tools that they use because the more tools you use, the harder it is to manage. I mean, that's just the old fact of life. And some people are going to be unhappy about that. Well, folks, look this gentleman up online. It's always a pleasure to talk to him. David Mariani of At Scale. It's Mariani. Look him up. We'll talk to you in the next segment. You're listening to DM Radio. DM Radio talking all things predictions for 2025 in the world of data, AI, and other fun things in the information management universe. And now I'm pleased to bring on Deval Patel of Lotus Labs. He'll be exhibiting at the CES conference coming up just next week and also has some interesting thoughts on where things are going and has a bit of a data story to tell as well. So, Deval, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about your ring and how you're able to help people who have disabilities and even in the future be able to help families of people who have disabilities. Go ahead.
First of all, thanks for having me, Eric. Nice to be here. Um, my name is Deval Patel. I previously managed a division at Apple for iPhone Watch and AirPods, and now have founded Lotus, where for people with limited lower mobility, we've made a ring that controls objects at home by pointing. But unlike traditional smart home technologies, there's no apps, no rewiring, no internet.
Hmm.
And so that's everything we're doing in phase one. That's what we'll have at CES. More than happy to talk more about that. But to the point you just made, what's clearly happening, and this is what we're doing in phase two, is data is becoming more and more key as we move forward. And
Hmm.
as data becomes more prevalent, the use of algorithms, in this case, in this day and age, AI or ML as a subset, becomes more and more prevalent as well. And so in our phase two, the number one request we get is this is fantastic. I would love to gift this to my child who has a disability or my older aging parents who are just getting older. And so this is great for my dad or granddad, but I don't live with them. And so I would love to gift them Lotus, which just happened over Christmas, but when I come back home, I'm still worried about them. Can you send me some data, some information letting me know they're okay? And so in our phase two, we're also allowing data as a service. Now, this is with permission from both parties. And so we just act as the postman. We just send data from you to whomever you want to send it to, and that's it. But I think what's becoming more and more prevalent, and this is the prediction for 2025, is Data carries a lot of power when it's with consent.
Hmm.
And so with that, data is becoming more prevalent in lots of products, especially IoTs, Internet of Things products. And second, with data, you don't just want the raw data because that doesn't carry much value for the end user. You want to add some smarts to it. And so this is where
Hmm.
algorithms come in, either machine learning at the bare minimum or truly AI based.
Yeah, I'm guessing that what you're able to do with this Ring device for your loved ones or your friends or whoever you're trying to have an extra set of eyes on is detect patterns of usage and then report that back. And if there's a significant change in that pattern, for example, like grandpa hasn't turned his lights on yet today, what's going on? Give him a call. It's that kind of thing, right?
That's exactly right. And so what we are able to do without cameras or being intrusive is just by regular usage of your device to control your lights, fans, appliances, or TV. We can do things like, well, my granddad usually wakes up every morning at 9 a.m., plus minus 30 minutes. Today it's noon and he hasn't even gotten out of bed yet. Maybe I should go check up on him.
Right.
Or it's 6 a.m. and he's already been to the bathroom 6 times. Potential UTI concern, let's go check up on him. But
Right.
all of this while still allowing your own granddad to be independent, preventing falls, and just being able to age in his own home instead of having to move somewhere else, say to a skilled nursing facility,
Yeah.
while you're getting peace of mind and relief. That's the goal.
Well, and I like that you also mentioned your next phase is going to have up and down, left and right for changing channels and changing volume. I'm old enough to remember when the remote control revolution hit, and I believe it was Steve Wozniak who really went all in trying to solve for the problem of remote controls and being able to control different devices with one remote. And goodness gracious, how that has just skyrocketed. I mean, some of the cheaper TVs that you buy, I bought a cheap one. You can't even turn the thing on with the box. And
That's
that, as an
exactly
old
right.
timer, that frustrates me. I'm like, I always misplace the remote. Can't you just let me go up and down or just basic stuff on the
Yep.
device? And I
Yeah,
wonder
there's sort of two extreme problems, and this is a very common piece of feedback we get. There's two extremes that we have problems with remotes now. One, there's like 50 buttons on it.
right,
And most people are just trying to turn it on, change channel, or increase, decrease volume. That's really the basics. Problem number two, like you mentioned, either there's one remote per device. And so then if you ever, this is especially true if you visit somebody, you never know which remote to use. And oftentimes the remote that you really need has been misplaced. It's put
right.
somewhere else, and you obviously have no idea where that's going to be. And so that's sort of what we're solving for, which is it's a universal remote on your finger. And when I say universal, I mean truly it can work in anyone's home. So if you're invited over to your friend's home, your ring will still work with their devices and vice versa. It doesn't work outside the home, so I can't secretly control anyone's devices because infrared does not penetrate walls.
Right.
But at the same time, I can control more than just the TV. I can control the TV, my lights, fans, even appliances, all without needing to rewire anything or use any apps or even use the internet. It's completely offline and therefore completely private and secure.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And then on the data side of this, just to kind of close out on that, how is the information captured? So obviously you've got what's so cool, folks, is it's just a ring that you put on your finger like any ring. It's got a little button and on button, and you point it at whatever the device is to get infrared, and it can bounce off walls, but it can't go through walls. But how is that data captured? And I mean, it's basically telemetry is what we're talking about here. And how can that be used then for other purposes, like just monitoring behavior, knowing that everything's fine with grandma or grandpa or whatever the case may be? How do you actually capture and then access that data?
Right. So in phase one, everything's completely offline. So your data stays in your home, nothing happens. If you want, and let's say you've now gifted this to granddad or grandma, and you now want their data to be able to make sure they were doing okay, the ring looks for neighboring Lotus devices and sends that information to the charging base. And the charging base is connected to the internet. And that's how the data is piped over to the cloud. And then from the cloud, you can send it to whomever you want. That can be you, it can be your brother, it can be your child or sibling, it can be the grandkids, whoever you want.
Yeah, I love that. And then in terms of being able to interface with televisions. You were mentioning before the show here that all TVs these days have built-in infrared. So they can all get something. Like you can at least turn it on and
Yep.
start toggling through the basic options. I mean, I noticed that in one of our TVs, you just turn it on and just click it again to toggle through. I mean, it's a very old-fashioned paradigm if you get right down to it, but goodness gracious, it does help at least to have something on that TV, so at least I can get it on. Like there's some
Absolutely. And
volume and
absolutely. In
basic
fact,
stuff.
even today, even with our current ring that is out and about, we can actually control on and off TVs, even TVs that are 14 years old. Like my TV is 14 years old. I just got back from traveling. I was able to control my hotel room TVs, which were even older. We actually, the way we tested this is we went to Costco and we could just turn on and off any TV in Costco. That's actually how we tested it.
That's hilarious.
And so it's a little bit of a party trick where we can go to a bar or a hotel room or, just Costco and control TVs over there. But of course, in phase two, you'll be able to also swipe left and right to change channels or front and back to increase, decrease volumes.
Right. That's very cool. I love that it's a very simple tool. I mean, and you came from Apple, right? And Apple, I remember when Apple TV came out, they had that vision of a very, very simple remote control, up, down, left, right, volume on, off. That's
Yep,
all you got. That's
exactly.
all you need. Enter. There you go. Instead of these, like you say, these devices with like 64 buttons, you're like, all right, which one again? And you get past the age of
Indeed.
50 and it's like good luck reading that stuff and what are you going to do? Look for the instruction set somewhere? Where's that? Who knows?
Absolutely. In fact, if you think about it, that it's that mindset that we took to smart homes in general. Because if
Hmm.
you want a smart home today, step one, you have to rewire all your existing wall switches to connect to the internet, to be able to talk to Amazon or Alexa or Google or Siri. That's step one. Step two, you have to then replicate speakers everywhere that you just did the rewiring. And then step three, you have to pair every single device one by one through an app. And by the way, if you lose power, you have to start all over again.
Oh,
And
no.
this is
Oh,
best
that.
case if you own the house, that 11 hours of rewiring or $2,000 if you can afford a contractor. This is best case if you own the house. If
That's
you're renting an apartment, which is a third of the US population, and even if you went through all this, if you now travel for work or for pleasure, there's no solution. You can't bring your smart home with you. So it was taking that Apple mindset to simplify smart homes in general, where anyone can do it. It takes all of 2 seconds without rewiring, without needing apps, and without even needing the internet.
Yeah. Great, great stuff. Well, folks, check these guys out online. Dhaval Patel of Lotus Labs. Is it Get Lotus? Is the
Yes,
URL?
the website is getlotus.com. That's GETLOTUS, like the flower.com.
I love it. GetLotus.com, folks. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, welcome back to DM Radio, talking all things predictions for 2025. And I'm very pleased to have Helen Gu on the line. She's at the airport right now, dialing in. So she's doing us a favor by giving us her time while waiting to catch a flight. And we're going to talk about Insight Finder. And Helen, let me know if I get this correctly. You've got a software as a service platform, and what you've done is figured out a way to dig into all the data that is floating around between systems, because when something goes wrong, especially in this federated world, it's very difficult to figure out what it is. Was it a server? Was it a hardware failure? Is it the operating system? Is it a bug in the application? Like what happened? That is a very difficult thing to ascertain. What have you done? How are you able to do that quickly?
Yeah, so we actually leverage a new technology called unsupervised machine learning that has been developed by my research group in the past 15 years. So this technology enable us to analyze a massive amount of data in real time and extracting the root causes and the predictive patterns out of massive amount of raw monitoring data, like your metric data, log data, trace data, and to figure out where the problem come from. Is it network, storage, or server? So to make things even more interesting, now we have the AI system, and so the problem can come from the data itself or the model. So we also incorporate those AI observability functionalities into our SaaS platform.
So you have built your own neural net of some kind and you're
Mhm.
ingesting data. How do you ingest the data? In other words, there's all kinds of observability these days, which is absolutely fascinating. I've got a theory that one reason for that is because Kubernetes took off and Kubernetes is incredibly powerful, but it's also
Mhm.
very, very complex and it opened all sorts of Pandora's boxes. And so now we have all
Right.
this machine data everywhere, stuff that New Relic and Datadog and Splunk and all these companies, like you said,
Mhm.
metrics, logs, and tracers. The combination of that is how you get somewhere. But how do you actually ingest the data? Where do you install and what do you touch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question because we can see there's tons of observability tools. So you have data actually spread out everywhere. And one of the challenges our customer has is that, to figure out the problems, they need to actually get access to all those data and analyze all of them.
Right.
Unfortunately, those individual observability tools, they only give you one fragmented view of your system. So that's where Insight Finder has basically this power. We developed this new ultra scalable unsupervised machine learning technology. It can actually process all kinds of data, not just metric data, but metric, log, and any type of data generated by our machines and networks. And then we analyze them in real time. And we also perform causal inference to figure out the relationships among those data, right? So we have the anomaly detection technology that actually can precisely detect where the problem starts from. And then we use causal inference to figure out, okay, what is the relationships among those anomalies and how those anomalies actually propagates in your distributed systems to cause your outage.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the Gen AI craze has definitely woken people up to the power of deep learning. I mean, that's what these things are. They're
Mm-hmm.
deep learning modules and I explain to people, there's no limit to the number of permutations you can have in these systems. And you could even have systems that change dynamically. You think about like software defined networking, software defined storage. Now we have software defined models basically that can
Mm-hmm.
change over time and adjust and adapt. So I'm just dying to know this deep learning underpinning that you've got, which is the engine that's running. What
Mm-hmm.
goes into that? What kind of model is it? Is there a heavy focus on inference layers? Tell us whatever you can about it.
Yeah. So one of the key things we did here is that we focus on like a high dimensional data analysis.
Okay.
So this is basically one of the bottlenecks in machine learning is that how many dimensions of data you can analyze at the same time. And
Right.
so we developed this basically the high dimensional unsupervised neural network technology that can actually ingest millions of dimensions at the same time and figure out, okay, what is the true anomalies in terms of the holistic view, right? Not just the individual metrics in individual dimensions. That's basically the traditional technology focus on univariate analysis, and you detect the problems, anomalies in one dimension, like one metric, one log, but that's not really that's not going to be scalable. And also you cannot actually figure out the relationships among those different distributed machines and the networks.
Right.
So that's basically, so what to get into our system is basically the metrics and logs and traces from all of your network and your servers. And then the output will be basically, which machine, which application, which metric or which log entry, which application is having problem at what time, and then basically what's the time order of those different problems. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, I've noticed that time series databases are getting popular again these days, and I think it's because of the challenges you're talking about. A time series database can be very powerful in a particular
Mm,
context, understanding what happens in a sequence of events and being able to
correct.
capture that data, right? A traditional relational database can capture a lot of information, but a time series database has that linear perspective, which can be very helpful in understanding when something began and when it ended, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's basically what the magic of ChatGPT come from. Is
Hmm.
basically the transformers is doing prediction, right? So it's predicting our natural language tokens. And so you will predict, okay, what's the next word you will see based on the words you have seen, you have spoke about, right? So this is basically the prediction, the power of prediction in the AI model. So what we do here is very similar. So we are doing predictions, the sequence predictions, but on the machine data, not the natural language part. Yeah.
Hmm. That's very interesting. And when I think about how well these new models are doing in terms of reflecting back prose and imagery too, right? And video now. Well, if you think about the complexity of the English language, I think it's more complex than machine to machine language, which, there are many different types of packets that are flying around, but I think the complexity is less in machine to machine conversations than it is in human language. Am I right about that, or what do you think?
So it's actually quite different. So for human language, I think basically we have a rich set of training data you can learn, right? So there's a tons of like articles you can learn across the internet. So that's how basically like, GenAI model like ChatGPT, they get trained with wealth of the data so they can do really good prediction. For machine data, the problem is that we don't have basically the labels, right? So for natural language, it's very easy to label the data because you understand, okay, this is good, this is bad. But for machine data, because our human brain cannot process those data,
Right, right.
particular time series data. So the lack of training data is actually one of the biggest challenge of this AI driven observability
I
tools.
see.
And that's basically where the Insight Finder is actually unique, is that we are using unsupervised machine learning technology without relying on labels to still be able to extracting those insights and the sequence and predictions. Yeah.
Here's a tough question for you. With unsupervised machine learning, how do you predict and or control costs? Because I'm sure there are a lot of compute costs, there are storage costs. I think compute is probably the heavy side. How do you monitor and manage that in an unsupervised model?
Right. So that's actually the starting point of Insight Finder, is that we start actually testing the technology at Google, right? So we actually see like whether this kind of technology can be scalable and cost effective in an ultra scalable environment like Google Cloud. And
Right.
so the result is showing that basically our technology, because we actually changed the way to do training, and so we can reduce the training complexity from O(n) cube or O(n) square to basically O(n). So we achieve kind of linear training, and we can actually support kind of incremental learning and sample by sample to actually update the model. So in this way, you don't need to actually store a lot of training data in order to build your model. You
Hmm.
can actually do really real-time stream-based machine learning. So as data flow in, and you update the model continuously without actually need us to store the data. So that's how we
Wow.
actually can do this very effectively. Yeah.
That's very, very interesting. I'd love to get deeper into the weeds on a separate call, maybe when you're not at the airport, because that's very interesting stuff. I mean, as you know, training models is very, very expensive. You're hearing all
Right.
about that stuff. There are some amazing innovations coming down the pike right now. I'll talk to you about one and maybe on a separate call. But being able to understand what it takes to get the signal, that's half the challenge, right? 30 seconds, closing thoughts.
Yeah.
What are your closing thoughts for 30 seconds? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So definitely, I think 2024 is being really a booming year for Gen AI technology, and so for 2025, we'll see like more those Gen AI application systems getting productionized, right? So it was actually being developed in 2024, but we see basically many companies start to actually adopt them in production.
Right.
So that's where Insight Finder can help our customers to maintain the accountability and the reliability of those AI models.
I love it. Well, folks, we've been talking to Helen Gu, Insight Finder. Look these folks up. I think it's fantastic. Safe travels. You've been listening to DM Radio.